Before the video begins, I want to thank the patrons and supporters for all their contributions. To support the channel, visit patreon.com/EricAlden. When I was a kid, there was a family of borderline mentally challenged people in my dad's small church group. I mean, the husband and wife were both very simple, as were their 2 kids. He was a diligent and careful truck driver though. The job was his life, and he was so proud of it because he was a useful contribution to society instead of sitting around on disability pay. I guess a woman committed suicide by driving across the interstate median and getting to run head-on into his truck. I remember him talking to my father right after it happened. Everyone still thought it was an accident at that point, and he kept stressing how he had tried to avoid her, and it seemed like she was actively steering towards him. Well, lo and behold, a few weeks later it comes out that the woman was suicidal and left a note saying something to the effect that she was leaving and never coming home. She had intentionally hit him. He was cleared of any disciplinary action from his company, but he never worked again. I heard that his family was evicted a few months later and he was in a mental hospital because his fragile psyche was done for. This was 20 years or so ago, so I don't know what happened in the end. First of all, I'd like to say that I've met plenty of truck drivers in my life, and most of them have been pretty pleasant, albeit a little lonely. However, like any group of people, there are gross exceptions. A few months ago, I was driving back to school from visiting my parents. It's about a 2-hour drive, so I usually keep myself entertained with music. I'm 5'3", 21-year-old female driving my dad's little old pickup truck, alone, in the leftmost lane of a 3-lane highway, dorking around to the music on the radio. Suddenly, I notice a semi-truck going the exact same speed as me in the rightmost lane. Embarrassed for getting caught in the dork mode, I stopped singing and dancing and tried to speed up so he couldn't see me anymore. He matched my speed, which ticked me off a little bit, so I looked at the driver, expecting to see some angry weirdo. To my surprise, he was smiling and waving. Thrown off, I kind of chuckled and waved back. Big mistake. He moves over to the middle lane to be a little closer to me, and now he won't stop smiling and waving. At first, I played nice, waving back a little because semi-truck beats tiny pickup truck any day, but I was mostly focusing on getting out of this guy's field of vision safely. I tried speeding up as fast as my truck would allow, about 90 miles per hour, and slowing down as suddenly as I could without endangering anyone behind me, but he would just match my speed no matter what. If there was someone coming up in his lane, he'd move to the right at the last possible second and pass them before I could slow down and get behind them. He has a lot more practice with reckless maneuvering than I do, so he has me trapped and he's using other cars to help him. The whole time, he's smiling, waving, holding up the #1 sign, finger for some reason I still don't know, and rapidly losing any charm he once had. As this continues for about 5 miles, I got worried and called 911. I gave them a description of the truck: white cargo truck, black cab with some Pennsylvania company logo on it, and driver, balding middle-aged tan guy with dirty blue t-shirt on. They advised me to pull off to the emergency shoulder on the left, but I've never done that, and it looked too narrow, so I didn't feel comfortable doing that. At this point, he was passing someone else in the middle lane, and I finally had a chance to slow down and merge 2 lanes over to the rightmost lane. I started speeding past them so he couldn't trap me again, and the operator told me to take the closest service plaza about 5 miles away. She said he probably wouldn't follow me, so I could stop there for a few minutes before getting back on the highway. She told me to call if he did follow me, but again, he probably won't, so she hung up. Now, he's still holding up the #1 sign and smiling this creepy, increasingly perverted grin at me while I avoid eye contact. The service plaza is in a quarter mile, and I'm not using any turn signals, but I guess he knew what I was doing because he braked hard and merged. The service plaza is in a quarter mile and I'm not using any turn signals, but I guess he knew what I was doing because he braked hard and merged behind me right at the last second to join me in exiting to the service plaza. After I get my heart to start back up from the coronary just experienced, I called 911 again. Now, the way the service plaza was set up was that semi-trucks had to use a separate lane winding to the right of the plaza that led to a parking lot behind the plaza just for big trucks. The rest of us used a smaller lane to park immediately in front of the plaza. I parked, and as I'm explaining to the new operator what's going on, I watch the semi creep around its path while the driver stares me down, smiling. I freaked. He knew where I had parked, so he knew where to find me if I just stayed there. I thought maybe I could have floored it to get back on the highway, but I was afraid he would see me and follow me again. So I drove to a gas station to the left of the plaza, which has a view of the semi-truck parking lot, hoping he wouldn't find me until the police came. The operator transfers me to the woman who was helping me before. She informs me that they've dispatched a couple of police cars, but couldn't tell me how long they would be. I see the trucker has gotten out of his truck and is heading towards me. Even though my windows are closed and my doors are locked, I'm panicking on the phone to the operator. She tells me the police should be there soon and I should be safe there, so I should sit tight while I keep her updated. I wanted to at least drive back to the parking lot I was in before, but it's a one-way entrance to the gas station, so I couldn't. I glared at the trucker and showed him my phone when he came close. He finally stopped smiling and made it look like he was going into the service plaza. I looked in my right side view mirror and found him hiding behind a big white pillar in front of the plaza, staring at me. Again, I freaked out and asked the operator where the cops were and if I could leave because he's being ultra creepy. She tells me to sit tight again because they should be there any minute. So I do. Then he comes out of hiding and starts walking towards my truck. I put it in drive just in case and tell the operator what he's doing. I refuse to make eye contact with him, but I keep watching my mirrors to make sure I know where he is. The smile is back and he starts walking circles around my truck, looking at it as if looking for a way to get in. I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until he circled back behind me, floored it, and told the operator I'm not waiting one more second for the police. She apologized and told me the police would look for the man and talk to him if they found him, and that I should focus on getting home safely, while keeping an eye out for him. I don't know if they did that or not, but I know none of that would have happened if I had my boyfriend with me. So, not only can't I walk alone, but I also can't drive alone as a female. Nice to know. Creepy trucker dude who can't take a hint? Let's not meet. This is mostly UFO/supernatural stuff I've seen on the interstate. Within the first few months of driving IIRC was Pennsylvania. My first couple years I was a night driver, so it was hard to see things sometimes. But the one in Pennsylvania was me trying to follow a flatbedder who was hauling serious ass through the mountains. At one point, I started to fall back because I can feel the van starting to lean. It wasn't long after that. I reached down to take a swig off the handy monster I had, and I look up. And there's a guy standing off to the shoulder just outside the tree line wearing what appeared to be some type of soldier's uniform. He looked like Revolutionary War era. He had a musket as well. As I approached, I could see him staring right at me, and then he starts walking back into the tree line, still looking at me. Before he manages to make it through the trees, he disappears. Like, he literally vanishes into thin air. I had my windows down, and the air in the area got real cold. After about a mile, the air warmed up again. I had a really sad feeling coming over me for a while afterward. Needless to say, I didn't stop for the rest of my shift. New Mexico, Nevada, and Utah are some states that, to this day, I still see stuff in the skies that I can't explain. lights rapidly changing direction and taking off at blinding speeds, but no sound barrier being broken. I've seen lights hovering over the desert several miles off of the interstate, then it suddenly takes off and the lights cut out. Various shapes and sizes from what I can make out. Again, night driver. I know military aircrafts pretty well, and some of them are more than likely were, but some of them absolutely could not have been military aircraft currently in mainstream use. Conventional aircraft do not move like that. The most vivid one would be at one off-ramp in New Mexico. I stopped to go to the bathroom and decided to turn it into a 15-minute break since my butt was sore anyway. As I'm stargazing and admiring how clear the sky was, I saw what looked like a formation of lights in the shape of a triangle lift off from the desert floor and then take off into the sky. I kept my eyes on it, and it just kept gaining altitude until the lights they disappeared. I looked down at my watch and I noticed it's not ticking. So I pull out my phone and it's off. I turn my phone on, and according to the time on my phone, it had been 5 minutes since my watch stopped. I felt like whatever it was that just took off had something to do with it. Kent, Texas is another one. There's an old Chevron station, I think it is. Seems like FedEx drivers like stopping in there in droves. I'm guessing it's a popular drop and hook point for them or something. But I stop in one day, and I need to go to the bathroom. I don't know why I didn't stop in Van Horn. So I pull off and I roll up to the empty lot across the street. Kent is an abandoned town. I walk up to the bush line and notice a makeshift fire pit. The wood is somewhat burned, but not all the way. The weird thing is that there's an unscathed dollar bill stuck in the wood. For a second, I was like, ooh, a piece of candy. But then there's this sudden feeling of nope that came over me. So I left it alone and pissed in the bush. As I'm walking back, I look over at it and get a real negative feeling. I look to the ground in front of me and bam, there's a rattlesnake looking right at me. I stop dead in my tracks and walk carefully around it. It kept staring at me the whole time. I ran as fast as I could back to my truck, feeling like someone was behind me. I kicked up a lot of dust getting out of there, and have never stopped in Kent since. Once in Missouri, I stopped at an off-ramp to stretch out and take a breather. As I'm smoking a cigarette, a little girl from some direction I couldn't figure out giggles and says, "Hey, mister." My initial reaction was, what the hell is this little kid doing out here at this time? So I talk back and say hi. She then responds with, "My mommy says you'll be okay. Don't worry." Now, utterly confused, I ask what she means. No response. Then suddenly, I feel like somebody is standing next to me, but it doesn't feel negative or bad. It just feels like someone's right there, next to me. Since it didn't have a negative vibe, I finished my cigarette and left. Later on down the road, I realized that I forgot to fuel up in my last stop when the warning light came on. So I scrambled to look at my GPS and find the nearest truck stop. I find one and set the course. As I roll up the truck stop, my truck starts sputtering, and I barely make it to the fuel line before the truck starts dying. I ran out of fuel right as I got on the fuel line. It wasn't until I was fueling up that it occurred to me, what the hell happened at my last stop? I've had many lizards try the good time routine with me, but one in particular got up on my truck and started talking to me. Her breath was pretty bad, not something I wanted to smell as I'm doing my logbook, getting ready to shut down. She tells me she'll give me the best blowjob I've ever had, and for a second, I think about it. Nope. Then for some reason she reaches down her spandex shorts and scratches herself deep. Her hand comes back up into the door and I can smell the most rancid crotch rot my nostrils have ever been blessed with. As politely as I could, I declined her services and told her that I really needed to get some sleep. She smiles and wishes me a good night, then hops on another driver's truck across the way. 10 minutes later, she's in his truck and it's not long before you see the cab rocking. I ate my granola bar and noped the heck out of there to my sleeper and went to bed. One occasion in Arizona was a really weird moment. A lady was begging for money, which isn't uncommon at truck stops. She gave me the whole sob story of her boyfriend left her, she didn't have a job, lost the apartment, her 2 kids were hungry, she didn't know what to do. Me being a social creature, I let the conversation go on for some reason. To make it short, she was molested by her father as a child, raped on several occasions in her teen years, and then found a lesser of an evil boyfriend who tried to get her into drugs, got her pregnant, and beat her all the time. I hear that kind of stuff a lot of the time, but just in case she was telling the truth, I gave her what I had in my pockets. It ended up being $40. She broke down and cried right there. And then I started to wonder that maybe she was telling the truth. She walked away after some more small talk. I go inside to get dinner, and bigger than shit, I see her with the 2 little kids, look as sad as can get, getting dinner. They all looked depressed. I knew then that she wasn't lying about anything she told me, and I felt a lot of remorse for not doing more. So I told the waitress to put their meal on my tab. The look on her face when the waitress said the meal was being paid for by someone else was a look I'll never forget. I've seen drivers duke it out on the fuel line many times. I've seen brawls happen in the back of truck stops, many rookies hitting other trucks on accident, you name it. The most memorable fight was when I was on a trip with a co-driver whom we shall say, our partnership fell apart real fast on the way home. In Arizona, I stopped at a truck stop between Flagstaff and the California state line. After an eternity, I finally get pulled up on the fuel line. I fuel up and go inside to go to the bathroom and get something to drink and snack on. I come back, and the sleeper curtain is open, no co-driver. Lovely. 30 to 45 minutes go by, and he comes out. That's cool, take your time because I'm not stopping from here on out. I put some trash in a couple bags and put it on the floor. It was mostly his trash from his shift prior that I couldn't stand having in the cab anymore. He opens the door and dumps the bag on the ground, so I lit his ass up with all the fury that I could muster up. 2 garbage cans 20 feet away. Wow. No. I go put the bags in the trash cans and I come back to the truck. As I'm doing my logbook, I look up and glance at my mirror. I see 2 drivers flapping wings at each other and being standoffish. Oh good, a fight. Let's watch. Suddenly, they go at it like baboons, fists flying, but they're not landing any hits. Then one of the drivers picks up the trash can and throws it at the other driver. The can hits him square in the face and blows open, with paper towels going all over the place. WWE just rolled into town, apparently. So I get out and start walking back to watch, and apparently every other driver on the fuel line had the same idea. The driver who got trash canned reaches into the storage compartment in his truck and pulls out a huge chain with a big padlock on it. He swings it furiously as he's coming back to the front of the truck where the trash canner is. Mr. Chain takes out the pump, takes out his driver's side window, knocks the mirror off his truck, puts a huge gouge in his fender, then he makes it to the trash canner. The guy runs around the other side of the fuel pump, grabs the squeegee, and starts beating Chain Gang with it. All it does is get the guy wet and piss him off more. So now it's a battle of melee weapons. Enough time rolls by that they realize neither weapon of choice is doing any good. So in an epic sequence of moves, they bear hug the living crap out of each other and flop to the ground and start bicycling each other. I walk inside and tell the lady that there's a fight on the fuel line, and she bolts out the door and breaks them up like a chaperone breaking up 2 kids fighting on the playground. All this because, supposedly, the guy with the chain said something to the trash canner's wife. His argument was that he didn't do anything, she just walked up and started picking. His argument was that he didn't do anything. She just walked up and started picking a fight. I believe the chain gunner more than the trash can guy. I'm not a trucker, but I have been a dispatcher for many years, and I have heard and seen many things unfold. One of my drivers making a delivery at Family Dollar store in Detroit had several black males rob them at gunpoint, told the manager, "Give me the boxes, fat boy," and loaded up the back of the SUV with random Family Dollar stuff. My driver asked if they were going to call the police, and the store employee said, "Nah, happens all the time." Another driver called me from his floorboard parked at a stoplight in Detroit and said he needed me to call the cops because kids were calling him cracker and throwing rocks at his truck. I had to instruct him to put on his big boy pants, get back in the driver's seat, and drive away. I saw a live feed from Dallas Terminal as trucks and trailers were flying through the air because an F5 tornado ran right over the Schneider yard. I had a driver end his life by driving his truck full speed into the Edwardsville, Illinois terminal, trying to take as many with him as possible. A driver yesterday told me on his return trip he saw and heard a family burning alive inside another vehicle, and there was nothing he could do to help. Apparently, there was a bad accident and something happened to cause the large fire, which very quickly engulfed their vehicles. They weren't able to get out, and he was one of the first to stop behind the accident and could hear them screaming. Another driver got distracted and didn't see traffic had stopped in front of him. He plowed into the back of another truck at about 60 miles an hour, and the entire cab of the truck looked like an explosion had been set off from the inside. The bunk and the cabinets were on top of the cab. The passenger seat was gone. You couldn't even tell it was a truck if it didn't have a trailer sitting behind it. He walked away without a single scratch. I'm sure there are plenty more stories that aren't coming to mind right now. In summary, truckers definitely have a hard job. I used to work with an ex-trucker who once had a woman commit suicide by jumping in front of his truck. He hasn't driven since, and now spends his time working with troubled and suicidal people. He's never quite been the same after that happened. The woman who had killed herself had left a suicide note in her house. She had a history of depression. The family didn't sue or anything. They said they felt terrible for him and that she chose to go that way and didn't want to put him through anything more. They actually said they were glad she was no longer in pain. The most disturbing thing that's ever happened to me was on a long drive back to college for my last semester before graduation. I'm a night person and was leaving kind of late for the drive, but was expecting to get in around midnight. Being that I would be living on my own after school, I was feeling a bit sentimental as it felt like I was leaving home for the last time. Home was somewhere else now. So, it's sunset as I'm driving towards the highway, and there's a beautiful low fog in the fields along the road catching the light. I decided around then that it'd be nice to try for a more scenic background route than the typical turnpike stuff, so I decided to cut off towards West Virginia. I stop at a diner, get gas, then proceed toward the WV line as night falls. This is the last human contact I make for the rest of the drive. I didn't foresee it, but an immense, dense fog dropped over Appalachia that night, slowing my drive considerably. At some points in the mountains, there were scarcely 10 or 15 feet of visibility. But there are small towns and the road leads me through. It's Friday night though, and it begins to feel oddly dead in each town I pass through. It had been maybe 9 or 10 p.m., and the local bars would look closed. There were no lights on any of the houses. I felt uneasy, but maybe that's just how it is there. Anyway, I'm making terribly slow progress with the fog and the back roads at night. Deer sightings keeping my foot a little light when the fog wasn't too bad, but at some point I'd have to nose my way through foggy intersections unsure if I'd find the other side. It was almost impassably dense at times, and the trip would take double the estimated time to arrive because of it. I'm often driving around 25 miles per hour or worse, trying to be safe, and it's around 1 or 2 a.m., and there is no cell phone service as I get into a large national forest. There's no other traffic around. There's been little all night, so I decide to pull over to pee, leaving the engine on for whatever reason. It'd be a quick stop. I'm not fearless by any means, but I try not to let myself get too jumpy on the roads at night. But as I'm coming around the car, undoing my belt, I hear voices maybe 40 or 50 yards into the forest, and then there's a scrambling through the dead leaves and bushes coming in my direction. It is pitch black night, no streetlights or houses, national forest, cloudy, foggy, starless moonlight sky, and I can't see anything off the road beyond the red glow of the taillights. Feeling sufficiently freaked out and not willing to find out more, I bolt back to the driver's side and floor it up to the next hill, happy I left the car on anyway. My heart was pounding. I never found out more about this little scare, and I'm glad for it. A little while longer, and I'm heading up some steep mountains and nearing an old fire watch tower from the World War II days. There's a plaque about it being a community morale builder to have built it even if it didn't affect the war in any way. I pulled into the overlook to actually pee because I never got the chance earlier. Now that I'm atop a sizable mountain, I suddenly get cell service and a string of concerned texts from my mom freaking out and asking if I made it okay. By this time, I should have been at my house hours ago, but I took long and unfamiliar ways in the dark and intense mist. Knowing that she won't go to sleep until I'm there, she's like that. I respond that I'm safely home, hoping that it will end. She immediately calls me and asks where I am, and I can't really ignore her call, having just texted her. I tell her I'm home, and she asks, "In Virginia?" And I say yeah, in my college town. She sounds deeply unsettled and says she's been trying to call me repeatedly. I ask why, and she says she got a really weird phone call from West Virginia, but way west of where you should have been, which is where I actually was. She said she got this phone call and a gruff young man with a backwoods-sounding voice was telling her he needed to speak to my name and swearing at her and saying all these nasty things. She said she heard people in the background screaming and people laughing. She hung up and called me a few times, but it went straight to voicemail. She typed the number in Google and saw it was from West Virginia and knew I was at least passing through a small part of it and called the number back. A small child answered and swore at her. Then the earlier voice ripped the phone back and started saying my name again and saying that he needed to speak to me. This is especially strange because I was driving my dad's car and I'm not registered to it, so even if they somehow saw my plates and could run them, they'd get his name. I think I even paid with cash at the diner and gas station, and that was 5 hours away and in another state. I can't think of anything I could have dropped with my name on it when I had stepped out of the car briefly earlier during the recent incident. I still had all my cards and my ID. It would be an incredibly strange occurrence or extremely elaborate scare prank, either way. I do my best to reassure my mom. I have no idea what that could be about and that it must be a weird coincidence. I tell her I'm at my house and I'm okay despite how troubling I find all this in reality. She gives me a half-hearted okay and we say goodnight. I pull out of the watchtower and pull off and continue into Virginia. Never have I been so comforted by the 3 a.m. dregs of late-night parties, students stumbling home at a nearby university town off a highway I know well from my usual route. I carry on to that highway and make it safely, and things have been completely normal since, but I have never brought it up with... I carry on to that highway and make it safely, and things have been completely normal since, but I have never brought it up with my mom again, nor have I ever had the heart to tell her where I was driving that night or how late, or of the voices in the woods. There's no climax, and there's no resolution. I'm trying to forget this.